This podcast is part of the Listen Frederick Podcast Network. To learn more, visit listenfrederick.com.
The Fedora Files.
Hello and welcome to the Fedora Files. I am Gregory Fedora, and with me I have Jason from Spooky Charlotte. And I follow him on Instagram. He has a lot of cool stuff. If you are not following him, you definitely need to. He has, like I said, so many cool things going on. A lot of cool stories about Charlotte, North Carolina, things that I'd never heard of, and it's just fascinating. But he's on a quest right now to do something really phenomenal. And I'll let you explain what you're doing, because I think it's really cool and I want to get into this. But so what is your current quest, the thing you're really pushing right now that you're trying to get done?
Yeah, so also to explain a little bit of who I am, it's I run the account SpookyCLT on Instagram and SpookyCLT.com, and I'm trying to shed a spotlight or put a spotlight on the spooky aspects of Charlotte, North Carolina. So like you said, ghost stories, legends, lore, but also, history, counterculture, all these different groups that are presently in Charlotte. Just, there's a lot of interesting things about the city, and I'm just trying to make sure everyone knows about them. So in that, one of the things I also focus on are cemeteries, of course. And in Elmwood Cemetery here in Charlotte, North Carolina, there is a headstone of Charlie Houck, who was killed by a lion in 1930. And Charlotte, North Carolina, no lion is native here, of course. So that begs the question, what happened? And what we have found is that Charlie Houck was a head animal trainer for the Melville Res Circus show. So he came into town by train. They set up shop. They had all of their, traveling zoo with him, and he was the trainer for the animals. He was a 65-year-old man, single, so his life was the circus. And one night when he was petting Leo the lion, he had just fed him, but he went to go pat him on the head, I guess, and Leo caught him with his paws and pulled him into the cage and wrangled him up pretty bad.
Oh, wow.
And his circus employees, or whatever you want to call them, pulled him out of the cage and got him to a hospital down the street. And that's where details get iffy. Some people say he died from infection within the week, but there's also a legend that they had to amputate his arm and he just died from the shock there on the spot. But either way, Charlie Houck was killed by a lion in Charlotte, North Carolina in the 1930s. So I found this headstone when I was trying to find information to put on Instagram to get people talking about it. And when I went to visit about a year later, a few months ago, I found that it was cracked into a few pieces and on the floor. It's actually being propped up against a fence right now, but it's knocked off its base.
Yeah.
So I reached out to the cemetery, said, hey, what would it look like to get this fixed? And they told me that they actually just had started planning an angel donor program. So on the Elmwood website, you can find headstones that have been broken and, donate money to have them fixed and restored.
Oh, very
because
cool.
With this cemetery, it's all on the user to maintain. So you buy into the plot, but if something happens, it's on you to fix it. So Charlie Houck, who was killed by a lion, 65-year-old single male, he didn't have any family to keep an eye on it. So here we are trying to raise the money to have it restored, have it standing upright, and that way, a few years down the line, people are still talking about Charlie Houck, who was killed by a lion in Charlotte, North Carolina.
It's a cool I have seen the stuff, and it's just a cool tombstone. It's so simple, and it's just in some way it's sad, but it's also kind of humorous when you kind of read it. You're just like, what?
Yeah.
It's pretty interesting.
You hit the nail on the head with that too, because it's a marble tombstone, and on the top you'll see there's garlands. I actually have one of the flyers here. So is this going to be a video?
Yeah. Good.
So this is my flyer for it, Save the Grave. And this is like an actual animation of what the headstone is with the cracks,
Yeah.
like the real cracks, but it's still standing up. But anyways, this top part, this is Garland, and it's
Mhm.
hanging on his headstone. And Garland is a symbol of victory over death.
Oh.
That's like the symbology when you see it on graves. At least some people say.
Yeah.
Which it's funny and ironic because here he is, Charlie Houck, killed by a
Killed by a
lion,
lion.
victory
Right.
over death. But I thought about it, and like this guy was 65 years old, the head animal trainer of the circus. Like he was on a daily basis dealing with exotic animals.
Mhm.
So this is the one time they got the best of him. But you just know that he had like a full life of
Oh yeah.
close encounters with lions and tigers and bears. So I thought that was interesting. And then the second thing is there are also flower medallions on
Mhm.
it, and flower medallions are a symbol of immortality.
All
So
right.
that like really stuck with me too, because I'm like, shoot, like if no one fixes this headstone, and then next thing you
They,
know, the stones are away, then Charlie Hawk killed by a lion, forgotten,
and
um,
disappears
and then he
from.
disappears. So those two things like really, it it's interesting, how it
Yeah.
ties into his story, whether that was intentional or here we are just storytellers, but.
Well, I mean, it's cool that you found that, Tinsa, and I'm glad you're like taking this up because I that's one of those that you want to keep because it's almost like it's like a folklore story,
Hmm.
and it just you gotta keep those kind of stories. Like I know you do that for Charlotte. You're
Yeah,
trying to
that's
keep,
the
and that's
point.
part of the folklore.
Uh-huh.
Charlotte, it's like this dude was killed by a lion in Charlotte, and how and why
Uh-huh.
and like you said, obviously, being a lion tamer, he probably ran into that a lot. And I actually wonder if the lion even meant to do it because
Right? Exactly. Yeah.
because it probably knew. And like I have pet cats, and sometimes you rub the cat and it like does this and like it starts doing that with its legs. So
That's
you
cats
wonder if
for
like
you.
that's what the cat was just like, oh, I'm playing, and just it has doesn't think about the fact, oh, I'm disemboweling my buddy. And
Well, and it's interesting that you said that too, because like for me, I always imagined it when I'm thinking about it that he had a good relationship, and just like you said, just one day the cat decided to scratch him,
yeah.
which happens. But in that same cemetery, there's also an obelisk for a man named John King, and into it is carved an elephant. And the reason is a similar story. Actually, a few decades earlier, John King came into town. He was an animal trainer, but he was known being abusive. So
Okay.
Chief the lion, who was like the big male lion of the, or sorry, Chief the elephant, who was like the
Yeah.
big male elephant for the group, crushed him against the cage. And the story is that because he was so abusive, that was Chief's revenge.
Hmm.
So it's interesting that like I automatically assumed that Charlie had a good relationship with this cat, but also all of the news stories, they never once mentions him being like an aggressive tamer or
Hmm.
an aggressive animal trainer or abusive. But they always say that for John King.
Oh wow. So the lesson is if you're in the circus and an animal trainer, don't go to Charlotte. Because I mean
It
that's
hasn't
two for
happened in almost
two.
100 years, so
Yeah. Maybe they're due. It's been 100 years.
and I can't actually confidently say that. That would be so funny if I found like numerous more
Yeah,
stories.
yeah. Like as you like, I have to come back on. I just found out 20 other animal trainers were
Right? That
killed in
happens once a
Charlotte.
decade. There's been a
Yeah,
human sacrifice to a
guys.
circle ant.
Yeah, the animals do it every year to appease the animal gods, and and it's not even about them being abusive. They just have to do it.
They
They
just
don't
have to
want
do
to.
it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's crazy. So those are. Do you have any other like cool tombstones that you found in Charlotte
So,
that don't need to be restored? But like I know those two are pretty interesting. Just that.
yeah. Yeah, no, there's actually a few things. And the reason I say that is this is an interesting point too. But when I first was talking to the cemetery about doing this and explaining that, like, I have a spooky Instagram account, I'm going to try to crowdsource this. They invited me to be part of this event that they do every year called Voices from the Past,
Hmm.
where like the historical society, they have all these people stand out by headstones of famous Charlotte people and explain who they were. And you can talk to them as if they were that person. So I'm going to be Charlie Houck, killed by a lion, this coming May 20th.
Nice.
When the event happens. But there's
I wish I could come to that. Dang it.
Yeah, May 20th, Mech Deck Day.
Man.
So when we're doing this, there's a lot of interesting stories, and I'm currently going to be a part of the planning committee for when they do a spooky version in the fall. So they're going to focus on more of the macabre stories, and there's quite a few.
Yeah.
To name one crazy thing happens is this woman, I want to say back in the 60s or so, would visit her mother's grave, like every weekend or something. And one weekend there was someone with malice in their heart in the cemetery at the same time, and they killed this woman. Her name was Foy Cooper. And then they stuffed her in a mausoleum. So here she was visiting her mother, and then she was killed in the cemetery, and then they buried her pretty close to where her mother is.
Oh, wow.
And there was this whole trial where they found this person who was just released from jail, and they blamed it on him, and he was put on the death sentence, but he kept what's the word I'm looking for?
Getting going to trying to get paroled or
appealing,
whatever?
yeah. So he kept appealing
it
because he was on death row. He kept saying that the reason that he said that it was him was because the police starved him, and that they would not let him out of the interrogation room until he said that he had killed this woman. And he got let go. Like many years later, he was taken off death row. He appealed it, and he was set free. So we still don't know who killed this woman and stuffed her in a mausoleum.
Wow.
Crazy stuff.
That is crazy. That's wild.
Shadow figures are seen in this cemetery. So that would make sense if you believe that you can only be a ghost if you were killed in that area.
Yeah.
So there's been people that have died in the cemetery.
Oh, wow. Dang.
Yeah. I'll have to come back on when we have the whole roster of
yeah, when you get ready to do the spooky version. Definitely that would be awesome. Like I mean I live next to a cemetery, so
awesome.
And we it actually has there's a couple in there that were from the Revolutionary War, and all the way up, and like I go walking through. I love reading. The thing is about old tombstones are just way cooler than modern ones. There's like a lot of information on it that we don't really put there. Like I read a couple, and I was like over in this cemetery, and I found it interesting, and it said one was this lady, and she died, but it didn't say why she died, but it just said the consort to so and so. I think it's like Brian Smith or something like that. So I was like, consort? What is that? Then I found Brian Smith's grave, and then Brian Smith's wife's grave. So this was his mistress, him, but it put it on there like, and this is his consort. And I was like, yeah, what? Okay. It's like that was in the early 1800s. Yeah. And I was like, that's interesting that they were like, okay. And I was like, because I was like, consort, I thought maybe that's just another name for his wife. But then I found his and his wife.
That's awesome.
Right next to her. And she was like a couple of places over. And it's just like, what the heck? But I told you before we started that there was I had a tombstone that I loved. And to me, it's a hilarious tombstone. And it's in Sydney, Ohio. And that's where my grandmother's buried. And my dad and I went there visiting, and he said, "Oh, you got to come see this tombstone because it's an old tombstone, and it was a huge like square, and it was ginormous. This thing had to weigh tons. What had the dude's name? And I can't remember his name. And if I get back up there, I'll take a picture of this. But it had his name on the front and everything about him. On one side, it said, "Those I loved." The other side was those I liked. And on the back it said those I hated. And it had like those I loved, there was like 4 or 5 names. Those I liked, it was like, 10. On the back there was like 100 names of people he hated.
What a petty person. That's hilarious.
And I was like, oh my gosh. I go, like whether whatever you believe about the afterlife, I was like, is that really how you wanted to go out?
Right.
But it's like he did. I was like, and the thing is, I thought about, I was like, he paid a lot of money for this tombstone.
Yeah, because
And
every word was probably a certain amount
yeah,
of money. Every
yeah,
letter.
and he's like, dude, it was like 100 names of people he hated. I was like, and like I remember, I was like, I thought it was the cool. Like I was like probably like 13 at the time, and I was like, that's the coolest thing, but hilarious. And then like now I think about, it, I was like, man, like I said, so that's so petty, and like that's not how I'd want people to like. All I know about this dude now is that he hated a lot of people.
And I can think of a few people that would do something like that. And
Yeah,
you just know that they like being mad.
yeah,
So
yeah, yeah,
it's just like a list of people that have probably crossed him one time, and
yeah.
he's like, I'm never gonna forget.
Yeah. Well, I mean, there's like if you go out, like I guess there's that cemetery in Hollywood, and there's a lot of like famous people out there, and that I can't
Mhm.
remember which comedian it was, but he's the one who actually has it on his tombstone that says, "I told you I was sick," and that it just has his name. I can't remember who it was, but it's, and I was like that.
Yeah.
My wife's always like, that's something like you would do. It's like, or
Your last
or
laugh.
or or like mine would be like, hey, let me out. I'm stuck down here, you know. But I was like, yeah, totally. Now, one other thing we talked about, you said you have some kind of story other than ghosts, but
Mhm.
kind of like a cryptid that you have run into or are hearing about.
Well, so
You wanted to tell me, so let's hear this.
I'll let you decide
What it
if you
is.
think it's a cryptid or not. But what happened was in Charlotte, there is this woman who has a podcast, but she'll do live shows at like
Mm-hmm.
this market in Delhi where, she has a guest or two on and then has a lot of audience participation. So she's
Okay.
recording this conversation in this group setting, and she had two people on, both affiliated with Charlotte in one way or the other. And the last
Mm-hmm.
question that she asked both her guests was like, has anything strange or unusual, something that you can't explain, has that ever happened to you? And both guests said that in Charlotte, they had an encounter with the first guy said he was driving in this area of town called Starmont off of what is South Boulevard. And he was driving with his friends in the middle of the night, and he saw a cat walking across the middle of the road.
Mm-hmm.
And they paused, they looked at the cat, and the cat continued to walk. But then it jumped up and spread wings and started to fly at them. And he said it started scratching at their windshield, and they continued to drive, and they didn't see it again.
Oh
So a
wow.
cat had transformed into an owl, and they saw it.
Yeah.
And then the next guy, he was like, it's crazy that that first guest said that, because when I was walking through this area of town we call the metropolitan area, there was a construction site, and on a chain link fence, he saw a cat hanging out there. But then the cat's head went on a 180-degree swivel and like looked back at him, and then once again turned into an owl and flew away.
Oh
So
wow.
these two guys who did not know each other, completely there on happenstance, had a similar experience with a cat owl hybrid. Um,
Very. Wow.
so I was there that day. So as soon as I heard that, I instantly made a post about it for Instagram saying, you know,
Has anyone seen this?
has anyone seen a cat owl hybrid? And the first time I posted it on Instagram, it did not get any type of reaction from anyone. But then I made a TikTok about it about a year later when it popped up on like my time hop, and I was like, oh, I was at this event a year ago. I wonder if anyone's had any experience with anything. Um, and when I posted that TikTok, then a bunch of people all over the state, both coastal and in the mountains, saying that they experienced something similar.
Hmm.
So saying, a lot of people did say the cat owl, and then other people said, oh, I experienced four-legged creature with wings. Someone was saying that it was the Nephilim from the Bible, like the
Yeah,
hybrid
yeah, yeah.
people. In that
Usually those
time,
would be bigger.
you know,
Yeah, yeah.
I'm not gonna
But
question
I'm
any.
not. Well, I mean, just I've heard descriptions of
Yeah, I
Nephilim.
hear you. They're
They're
supposed to
always
be
pretty
giants.
big.
Yeah,
So yeah.
yeah.
So,
Um,
but who knows? Yeah.
but anyways, all these people started interacting with the post. So then I'm thinking like, shoot, what is going on? Now, owls are weird little birds
As a
to begin with. Like if you look at pictures, they can do like
yeah.
things to make them look like they have cat ears, and
Hmm.
they do walk on two legs sometimes. So like it's very possible
They're just
that
seeing them.
they just saw a weird owl that was
Yeah.
acting unusual. But what are the chances, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. It's
So like has that a cat owl hybrid, has that like anything that you have come across?
now there is. I mean, I know North Carolina had like what tribes are in North Carolina, like Native American. Do you know?
Catawba
Catawba.
and um oh gosh, Lumbee are the big ones for our area. I
Did
think there's a few more.
Seminole ever? Were they ever in that area? I know they headed down to Florida. I'm just curious.
I'm not sure.
I'll have to look into those two tribes, just what their belief system was. Now,
Mhm.
Seminoles had a belief in an owl warrior,
Okay.
and it was almost kind of like the Cherokees had kind of like the Navajo kind of had like the skinwalker type of stuff,
Yeah.
where the warriors could turn into these animals or turn into these, but then the Seminoles had this thing, and it was called the Stikini, and it's very like they would. I don't think they really did feline, but it was like they would be human, but then they would in at night they would turn into this owl thing. They'd still have humanoid parts, but they
Mhm.
would attack people or do things as, part owl, part human. And that was like a belief of that. And I'm curious, like I might have to look into those two tribes. You can send me the names of those. I'd be interested to look up to see if there's some kind of folklore with them of something like
Yeah.
that, because
Well,
the
so there
the
are.
Sakini thing was kind of like a curse, like
Mm,
the witch doctors, not that's not the medicine men would, because witch doctors more voodoo down in Haiti, but the medicine men would uh curse, and also supposedly if you spoke the name Stakini, which I've done multiple times, you could turn into one, and it hasn't happened to
yeah.
me yet. But like that, you were, unless you were of a certain level of enlightenment, you would turn. So maybe I'm at that level. I don't know, because it hasn't. At least I don't think I have turned into it. Uh, that sounds similar, like just the whole changing into this owl thing.
Yeah.
That's and
And
yeah,
and this part of, well, I guess North Carolina in general has multiple other cat-like cryptids.
like yeah. Do you have the Wampus cat in that
Yeah, I was gonna
area?
say number
Yeah,
one, Wampus Cat, and that had a
yeah,
similar story where, the first one was supposed to be like a woman who was
yeah,
doing
and
something that she shouldn't have. She was turned into a cat with like six legs.
yeah.
Um, there's the Santer, which is another large cat. It was lumberjack lore.
Hmm.
So it was said to have like a battle tail with like
Yeah,
hard
like
bristles in its tail. And then we have the Beast of Bladenborough, which
yeah.
was supposed to be like a large cat cryptid. And overall, North Carolina in this area, we used to have mountain lions and cougars.
Hmm.
So my logical side is saying that's just what they saw.
Yeah.
And you know how stories happen. But a cat owl was something very new that I hadn't heard about before.
But yeah, if you can actually send me the information you have, because I'd like to
Okay.
research it more and see what I can find out, like just like what the description, the people, like if you have the description
I'll
they
send you the
had.
podcast. It's
Yeah,
on
send
record.
me the podcast, and then I'm gonna look up your Instagram and look at what you posted and see, and your
So
TikTok and see.
I posted it again today on Instagram just because I was really hoping that someone would say something that I could bring up now, but no one
No one
no one
did.
has posted
No,
commented on it yet.
that's cool though. That's interesting. I love that kind of stuff, And I bet you there is some kind of lore behind it, like if we
Yeah.
look in it, because they all, like Native American lore has a lot of cool things like that. And then I don't know, is it real? Is it like a demon? Is it like a whatever spirit thing? Or you
Yeah.
never know.
You never know. And
Because it's
there's
curious, how far apart are those? Like, because I don't know the area, but the two places they saw it, what is
A
it?
good distance. Probably at least 10 miles or so.
Okay.
Um,
I was just curious how close they were to each other. Like,
yeah, and then
yeah.
also the times, only one guide said what time it was, but it was back in like 2007. So it had happened a good chunk of time ago. And then the other guy who said it didn't mention, but it sounded like it was a fresh memory for him.
Oh, wow, yeah. Well, I don't think I'd forget that. Like,
Right?
if I saw a cat grow wings and then go crazy, that's and especially if it scratched up my car. I was like, dang it.
Right? Yeah.
Yeah, that's not cool.
All right. I had one more thing that I wanted to talk to you about. And it's mostly for me, but Bigfoot.
Yes.
What are your thoughts on Bigfoot? And the reason I'm asking is because I have like a theory that I haven't really heard people piece together out there, that I want to share.
My thought. I've never seen it or heard it. My thoughts on it, like, it's weird. I don't say there isn't such a
Mhm.
thing. I think there probably isn't. I think people have seen something, interacted with something they don't quite know. It could be any number of things. It could be because actually some parts of the Northwest, it's dense. You're not going to find, especially in the
Mhm.
Himalayas, and they have the Yeti and all that. And my dog's
Yeah,
name's Yeti. But
nice.
but
Well, on
they
your
yeah.
cryptids episode, you also mentioned man squatch.
Oh yeah, the man
Or
squatch.
so
Part
I was like,
man.
well, yeah. So you must be,
I
at
love the
least.
man squatch. Like that, but well, yeah, like I would love for it to be true. I mean, the biggest issue I have with Bigfoot is not necessarily Bigfoot itself, but it's the Bigfoot experts.
Uh-huh.
And that's where I get into issue is like, because these people, when they come on, they're like, well, as everybody knows, Bigfoot loves blah, blah, blah. And I'm like,
Yeah.
how does everybody know this? We still have not caught one. We've never interacted, as far as I know. If they have interacted, they've never shown video of it. But I think there is something out there because I even like some of the footage people have gotten over the years, like it. I mean, I do video and film editing as a job. So when I see stuff, there are sometimes I look at it, I'm like, okay, I could see how that is made. Like
Yeah.
I could make that. Then there's
Well,
other times
so
others I'm like, man, that is hard because he's going between trees. It's like, and the trees moving. I'm like, that's big.
fun fact, the Patterson Gimlin film,
Yeah.
there is a local costume maker, Morris Costumes, like the actual Mr. Morris. He's based out of Charlotte, but it's like one of the largest costume providers for the country.
Mm-hmm.
And he claims, to this day, that he supplied the gorilla costume for the Patterson Gimlin film, and
Really?
that it was a gorilla costume with a guy wearing football pads on, and that's why it's looking larger than a standard guy.
Okay.
Um, but anyways, I want to show you, or I want to share with you my theory.
Do it. Yeah, I want to hear it.
And there's a few dots to be connected, but um, I believe that Bigfoot is kind of like a way to whitewash like a race of giants that used to be native to North America. And the reason I say that is because number one, in like history, you could find the Saris Indians,
Mm-hmm.
who were known to be like a tribe of giant people out
Yeah.
west. And I found that in the Charlotte Observer, which is a Charlotte paper, and it was an article from 1897.
Mm-hmm.
And people seem to know about the story, but then the thing that really stuck with me is in Abraham Lincoln's private journal, he
Mm-hmm.
mentioned the extinct giants, and their bones were in Indian mounds.
Mm-hmm.
And one side says that these are references to mammoth bones, and then the other side says that these are references to a race of giants that were just casually part of like North America.
Mm-hmm.
And what really one thing that I was trying to connect with on that was America has a lot of folklore based around giant men.
Mm-hmm.
There's the John Henry story, and then there's Paul Bunyan
Mm-hmm.
is a
Yeah.
huge one. And the reason, like, he was taken over by a marketing company to sell wood, but the stories of a giant behemoth of a guy able to chop
Yeah.
down trees with ease could easily have originated from race of giants that encountered
Yeah.
lumberjacks when they were, chopping down all the trees out in like the
Yeah, well,
forest of North America, like fur trappers and things like that.
yeah.
And like I put this all together within one day, this theory, and all the information was so easy when I was like, man, these things are just like out in the open. I wonder if anyone has like connected these dots before. So when people are talking about encounters with like larger
Yeah.
people, a lot of times it's hair all over, but if it's some type of it's just like small society of people who are naturally 7 foot tall, and over time they have adjusted to the climate to have, hard hobbit feet where they don't care about stepping on rocks and stones, and a guy has grown his hair out and is wearing a fur coat from something that has been passed down a couple of years. Like,
Yeah.
who knows?
Yeah. No, that's interesting though. Well, because like the Idaho wild man, that's another like they didn't call it Sasquatch. It was the wild man, and he was a big dude. And Teddy Roosevelt even wrote about him.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. And if you can find his, I think it's The Great Wilderness or something. Just look up Teddy, but it's one of his books. And it's something wilderness, and I can't remember it off the top of my head right now. Actually, I did a video about the Idaho wild man. So if you go to my YouTube channel and watch there's a short on the Idaho wild man. I mentioned the book, and he talks about a wild man. And then there is actually a story, a legend of some Native Americans fighting these giants out west, and they chase them into a cave. And they end up blocking the cave off and killing them. But they were supposedly giants with red hair. And
that's
another story that goes along with what you're saying. So yeah, and a lot of our Sasquatch stories come from the Native Americans. So it might all be the same thing, but they just called it different things. Different tribes called them different things.
Exactly. It's the same people talking about, or different people talking about the same thing.
Yeah. It's kind of like the Thunderbird, and like, people,
Yeah. Any type of winged cryptid. But yeah, so those are my thoughts. I'm glad I got the chance to say them on a podcast. So now they're immortalized.
Dude. Yeah. Now I'm going to have to think more about that. I like that. I like that connection. I'd never thought of it that way, but that's a good one. But yeah, that's awesome. Celia, you came on to talk about Charlie Houck.
Charlie Houck, who was killed by a lion.
And then we went from that to an owl cryptid to Bigfoot, like all in one. This is a fun, like, I love like chatting like that, like getting a bunch, that's what's fun. That's why I like having you on. You're fun to have on.
Oh, I try.
Yeah. You definitely have to come back when you get ready to do your spooky, and tell me the lineup.
I'll have the brochure with me, and we can go down the list.
And you can tell partial stories just to whet the appetite to get people, because that might be one where I'd be willing to head down to North Carolina to do that. Like, I would love to go to your one you're doing 20th, but we're doing a Snallygaster festival that same day. So I was like, I can't. I'm already doing that. So, but yeah. But I want to thank you for coming on, because I know.
Yes, thank you.
You've got things in your life that you got to take care of, and I have
a baby. I need to take a bath real quick.
Yes, exactly. So take care of your baby and your wife and Charlie Houck, and get his tombstone fixed. And definitely thank you for coming on.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
And for all the ideas, because you've added some ideas to my head. Now I got to look into it.
Yeah, I'm excited to hear what you think.
Yeah, and for those of you, thank you. And for those of you watching, listening, however you found us, thank you, and come back. And as always, stay safe and keep searching.
The Fedora Files.
Check out fedoracrt.com today.